Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Morning. Welcome to day 2 of the Mind the Gap Designing Residencies for Everyone conference here in London. My name's Oyinda Mola, or Oyinda for short. For those who are visually impaired, I am a Black woman with a braided bun and 2 braids down the side of my hair. I'm also wearing a printed blouse. Sorry, I just want to I know that yesterday was super intense. I'm going to do something really crazy with everybody. Can we all maybe get up? For those of you who can, if you can't, then you can actually do it sitting down as well. So, heads, shoulders, knees and toes, head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears, and mouth and nose, head, shoulders, knees and toes, Okay. I just wanted to make sure everyone was okay. So I know yesterday was really intense, but it was just such a wonderful day. And I think it was a great way to kick off this session. And I don't know about you guys, but it really showed me that there's a real passion for this industry that we're all a part of. And I mean, just some of the networking that took place yesterday and some of the conversations that were had yesterday, you know, there's real expertise in this room. There's a love for both artists and the arts as a whole. But we don't want to tire everyone out. We want everybody to be present. But we do have a lot to cover, so I just wanted to make sure everyone's awake. Let's kick off with this morning's session, which is co-creation, challenges, and opportunities. I'm going to read everybody's bios, and then I'll let everyone kick off with some presentations, some conversation, and then we'll have some Q&A. So I'll start with Joey Chin. Joey is an artist and writer. Her work is located at the intersection of text, narrative, and visual art, staged through poetry, acts and modes of reading, and various disruptions. Her key focus is in the development of personal communications between the self, markings of territoriality, and the inner conversations between the two. She holds a parallel career in public arts education with over 10 years of experience in the fields of arts administration, festival conceptualization, management, residency development, and public arts programming. Joey holds an MFA in creative writing from the City University of Hong Kong, and her works has received scholarships, grants, and awards from organizations including Asia Europe Foundation, the Korea Arts and Culture Educational Service, the Royal Overseas League Arts, the Dorothy Chung Foundation, the National Arts Council, the Run Run Shaw Library, and the Society of Humanistic Anthropology. So if you could just put your hands together for Joey. We're also joined by Sam Wilkinson, who is UCL Head of Public Arts and Cultural Engagement. Sam Wilkinson is a curator and commissioner. She has worked for large-scale mixed-use developers and local authorities to prepare and implement commissioning policy. She has curated and delivered programs of artwork across the UK. In Bristol, she developed a 3-year artist in residency program before working as a curator in residence with artist Neville Gaby for the Olympic Delivery Authority. In collaboration with CAC, she developed the Habitation Residency Program for the University of Cambridge. Sam joined UCL in 2018 and is leading on their public art program, which includes the development of residency programs, as well as temporary and permanent artworks for the campuses. Russell Martin, who's the Director and Program Manager of Artquest. Russell is a visual artist and writer, originally from Glasgow. He leads Artquest and has worked with the program since 2001 on a part-time basis. As an artist, Russell has initiated galleries and project spaces, written for artist catalogs, taken part in mentoring and peer mentoring, and sat on charity boards. He also takes on active roles in his housing and cooperative in North London. So, welcome, Russell. And last but not least, Lissa Kinnaer. Lissa is an international relations specialist at Flanders Arts Institute. She is responsible for sector support and international relations for visual artists at Flanders Arts Institute, an interface organization and expertise center for the performing arts, visual arts, and classical music in Flanders, Belgium. The organization supports and stimulates the development of the arts sector and policy making, and caters to both national and international professional arts audiences. Lissa holds master's degrees in literature from the Free University of Brussels and in cultural studies from Goldsmiths College, University of London. Before joining Flanders Arts Institute in 2011, she worked for several artistic organizations, the Institute of International Visual Arts, the Center for Fine Arts, Brussels, Kunsten Festival des Arts, Brussels, and the Biennial de Lubumbashi in DRC. In 2009, she received the British Council Cultural Leadership in International Fellowship. So I'm going to hand over to Joey.
Hey, hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Joey, and today I'm going to be talking from the perspective as a writer and artist, and also broadly in the fields of arts management in the Public Service Institute in Singapore. So like I mentioned, I'm from Singapore. So those of you that are not familiar, Singapore is a small island state in Southeast Asia. Immigration is historically one of the impetus for population growth from the 19th century and today. And we have 4 official languages: English, Chinese, Tamil, and Malay. So firstly, I'd like to say I'm really happy to put a face to so many of you here, including the residencies that I've applied for and also rejected me. Okay, I'll have a word with you later on. But jokes aside, you know, this is a presentation from a perspective as a writer and artist, but also as an arts organizer. So I'm not representing the organization that I work for today, because, you know, there are certain contractual obligations. And if I were to do that, then I don't think you'll be seeing this mess over here today. It will probably be a corporate presentation, Sergio UI, font size 36. Yes. So, like I said, I'm an artist of a day job. Some of you here are also artists with a day job in arts administration, arts organization. You know, I always jokingly tell my friends who are also artists that, you know, always the arts manager, never the artist. And how we wish that we could find somebody to help us progress with our career the same way that we are helping others as well. Okay, so anyway, let's just look at this. So I apologize, it's a bit messy. I did think of various ways in which I could, you know, sanitize this, make it a bit more well organized. You know, because I'm from Singapore, we're very neat and very tidy and big on organizational skills. But then I thought, you know, let's just put it as it is. Because it's important to show the seams, the inner workings of what is invisible in order to make the visible visible. So I won't be covering every single point because I feel like some of them have already been done previously. So I'm just going to talk about a few points here. And this is also the model which I'm familiar with or have been part of. So let's look very quickly at funding bodies. And I'm going to talk from an institutional perspective. Why fund artist residencies? And it could be because of certain industry gaps or bigger picture objectives. For instance, you might be trying to increase the number of mother tongue language readers in Singapore because of a dip. And now how English is possibly the more predominant language, and people may not be reading in the mother tongue languages. So that could be an industry gap that they want to fill. We're also looking at perhaps a sector or audience development. And what is a funding body? So there are various models. They could include private organizations. Well, personally, I know of industrial printers who work with artists to fund artist residencies. And they can also take the form of even luxury fashion chain retailers who want to look at how they can cultivate the next generation of designers. There are also transnational projects. You know, you could be working with cities of literature, Commonwealth artists, or funding from cultural groups that promote languages. And then also you have your national agencies or your councils, your art councils. And let's look very quickly at who's usually involved on an institutional level. You have your legal team who drafts up the MOU, the letter of agreement, and basically looking at terms at what happens if something is fulfilled or not fulfilled. You work very closely with the sector director or the funding manager or the funding representative. And at this point, that's when you start to look for a host organization. So the host organization is typically the middle person that works closely with the artist and also the funder. And when you have host organizations, they can typically be museums, community centers, libraries, archives, universities, and so on and so forth, right? And what is it that the host organization has? So for instance, access to space, and space is a very big thing, especially in Singapore, where it's so tight, it's so dense. So that's something that the host organization may be able to provide. There is also the repute and trust that it has built upon over the years, the community, or also the audience, and also content knowledge. So this content knowledge might come from different people in the organization. They could be content specialists, they could be librarians, curators, community arts producers. And when we look at who's involved in this picture over here, that's when you have the project lead, and the project lead oversees the entire project life cycle of the residency, from the initiation all the way to delivery and its eventual evaluation. And that is very important because this person is trying to really look at the alignment of what it's trying to achieve as an organization, because a residency may not always be the core of the organization's business. So it looks at how much time you're willing to invest in this project alongside other partners. And when you do that, you also need to take into consideration of subject specialists. So subject specialists, by the time it arrives with the subject specialist, it's almost like a game of pass the message through the telephone line. Because then you might have a disjunct between the audience of the subject specialist. For instance, when we talk about language, mother tongue languages, there might be a gap in who you're trying to reach out to. It could be very specifically children between the age of 7 all the way to 12 who are reading in the Chinese language. But then that might be in conflict with what the funder is trying to do. And sometimes they can be very broad. For example, how can we increase the number of people who are reading in the Chinese language? Okay. And then we move on to talking about approaching writers and artists. I'm always a bit confused whether it's closed call or close call with the D or without. Yes, because I feel like the closed call is open to some, but definitely closed to others. But that's, you know, a separate subject matter on its own. So why why do artists or writers want to be part of an artist residency? So we look at things like project development, and the artist might be looking for resources. They could be archives, they could be digitized collections, rare materials. It's also part of their career development. So if you work in a corporation, you work in an organization, you know, you have your trading roadmap, how can you better improve your skill sets? But when you're an artist, you're largely responsible for your own career trajectory. So the artist residency is really one way to climb up your own artistic ladder, so to speak. And other instances of why they might be interested in taking part in artist residency, you're looking at co-creation opportunities. And that's when I want to talk about co-creation itself. So sometimes there might be non-meaningful or poor understanding of community and also its audience. So for example, you might have a writer that's engaged to work broadly in furthering or encouraging readers in a specific mother tongue language. And then they go on to create a program. So for example, a creative writing workshop or a poetry workshop. And sometimes they are with themes that can only be better appreciated by an older audience. But that's not the gap that we're trying to fill in here, right? Because the gap could be trying to encourage children to read in another language or literature. And also in times like this, you really should be looking for a person who is writing stories for younger children. And then the last point I want to talk about over here is how, you know, co-creation can be as a mode for further inquiry as audiences, how they like to be engaged, their concerns, and also their urgencies. So I'd like to just quickly bring up something that I did. So last year, I had a project with a South Korean artist, and we decided to use fiction as a starting point to engage women in Singapore and in South Korea into the topics of women's development. I don't know how many of you work with text or work with fiction. Maybe it's just visual arts, but just something for you to consider to expand the repertoire of how you can engage your audience. So we found that fiction is an effective way to engage people, because with fiction, with characters, with stories, they provide the sort of emotional distance to critically engage with their personal experiences. Because it's, hey, this character could be me, but it's also not me. And then this gives you the starting point for discussion, sharing for anecdotal experiences. And one of the things that we discovered, because we were thinking very broadly of Asian women development, and we thought that you know, we have a couple of prompts, we'll engage them in a collage making workshop, you know, to consider the possibilities and the dreams for the protagonist of the story. And here are some of the things that we thought were interesting learning points. So for example, in Singapore, it's a higher context culture. So during the workshop, we had a lot of people who spent more time talking, sharing their experiences, complaining, mostly about their mother-in-laws. And we also attracted women who were slightly older. Whereas in Seoul, it is a culture in which they are more interested in aesthetics, interested in presentation, so they spent a lot more time creating the collages and presenting them. And we also had younger women who were in the workshop, and they were more keen on discussing their careers, because they're relatively young. It's their first job. They want to talk about women's development in the corporate sector. And one of the interesting things that we found out was that a participant mentioned that actually she's not very concerned about women's rights. You know, what about human rights then? So one of the things that we realized is that not everyone is ready or interested to talk about certain topics that you think that they would be. And we're even looking at the intersectionality of intersections, you know, in Singapore versus South Korea. So in Singapore, it is multilingual, it's multicultural, whereas in Korea, it's more homogeneous. And when we think about intersections, they can really, truly differ. So the last thing which I want to talk about is also the work that I did with the Chinese Community Center in Birmingham. So when I went there, I was really surprised by the linguistic diversity of the audience. And they came from, different parts, including Harbin, Hong Kong. They were also Chinese Vietnamese. And when I first entered, I wasn't sure whether I was able to understand or to even lead the workshop, because I heard Cantonese, I heard Kek, which is also another dialect. I speak some Hokkien, but it was not something which they understood. Having said that, though, eventually I was saved by the topic that we were working on, which is a Chinese classic. And I feel that because of the topic, and when we think of classics, we think of classic literature, it can sometimes be very intimidating for people. But when you pick a piece of text that has got to do with universal themes, language, family, it's really not as intimidating. So I just want to close off by also just encouraging all of you to think of how you may use fiction or text when you are engaging your participants in your own practice or also in the artist residency. So thanks so much for listening to me. I'm just going to close off by just an open invitation, because I did this on Miro. So if any of you would like to contribute to this, to add on to the mess of how we run artist residencies, whether you're a funder, you're a host and an artist, or a writer, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Great. Oh, am I going the right way? Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Wilkinson from UCL. We're very happy to be part of this conference from UCL and being in our building here. I'm head of public art for UCL, which is across the whole of the campus, but I'm also very involved with the team here on the community and cultural engagement round East, which is a new campus. We're opening just the other side of the park, which if you have a walk around, it's worth going and having a look. There's quite a lot of new artworks in the building. But what do we do? Public art is used very much as a broad brush term because we couldn't think of a better way of trying to describe how UCL have a council level down commitment to involving artists in how we develop our capital programs, how we develop our estate, but also how we work with artists and communities together to explore what the character is of us as an institution, and to sort of share what our research is, how we also bring communities of interest to inform our research and take us on a journey. So East has been developed very much in collaboration, even curricula, even some of the courses with communities. So our team is really very much about how do we develop projects that allow our academics to get the skills to talk about what their work is through public engagement, how artists work collaboratively through that process, and then how we find the right ways to establish relationships with communities where there's genuine parity and shared experience, and we're not doing to people, we're working with. So we have a range of programs, including Artists in Residence for students at Slade School of Fine Art, where we give them skills development and they immerse themselves in our with us for a year, etc. What I want to talk to you about today is a program of work, a residency program that came out of a very important project we call Trellis, that's been running in East London for 4 years. Lissa and Bryony and the team here drive that project. And that is really about how we develop knowledge exchange programs, how we get academics to work in partnership, as I've just described. Trellis has been running for 4 years. We've evaluated every single moment of every single part of the project. We've spoken to the artists involved. We've looked at how we do open calls, how we do the support structure around the artists. And because of the knowledge exchange and the learning that we've had through Trellis, we've been able to start a project on main campus, which is called Trellis Arbor. Now, we all know what a trellis is. It's a structure by which things can grow and be supported. Arbor is a similar dendritic model in the brain. So it's how the brain supports learning and knowledge internally. And the programme is being developed around the Queen Square Institute of Immunology, and the dementia research. We are building a new global headquarters for dementia research in London at UCL. So we have an extensive programme of how artists are working to broaden understanding of what dementia is and the 8 diseases, and I won't bore you into it, but it's quite a profound, quite a difficult, quite an emotional place to be trying to develop these kind of projects. So the Arbor project is about how we can support academics within this very specific area of work, of which we have 750 academics at UCL who are global leaders, from people working in labs looking at petri dishes and biologists, through to clinicians working with hospitals and staff to look at how we can do translational research to get new drugs out into the market to support people in their dementia journey, which is very harrowing, and a lot of the projects we're doing around picking these things. So Arbor came around based on the learning of Trellis, and it's about how we establish collaboration through an open and generous and a journey that people are all taking together. So how do we do that? We start off by developing a brief. What are we trying to achieve? Who do we want to be part of this project? We want academics to apply to be part of it. We want to give them skills training, and we want artists to be part of the process. Starting off with, we did lots and lots of online, face-to-face, one-to-one conversations with the academics. Their instinct is often, oh, I'd like someone to come and illustrate our work. This is not what we're looking for with the relationships. And we take them on a journey to understand what this kind of relationship, what they might need. They can tell us what kind of support they need. Have they got any experience of working with artists before? And if not, what can we do to help them go through this journey? We then invite people to apply. They don't have to have any experience before, but they have to have this desire and willingness to be part of the process. We do an open call for artists. For many years, we've been doing this. So we do have, I think people are looking at the calls we're doing through Trellis and seeing that they're really positive and genuine opportunities for artists to be in residence with us. And we often get quite a few hundred applications. This was very unique at Arbor because of the artists who applied, most, I think nearly everyone would have had some personal reason for wanting to be involved in some research around neurodegenerative disease, which made that whole selection process very, very challenging for us. We had, I think, the first time, or growing, I think it's a cultural thing. People are much more willing and interested in sharing whether they have neurodiverse challenges themselves. And we found when artists applying for this project, there was a real openness about the challenges that they might have as artists going into this project. And therefore, right at the beginning, we put infrastructure in place. So, for example, we had a young man who is a paranoid schizophrenic who wanted to apply as an artist, or he is an artist, and our team supported him in writing the application and then put in place anything he needed for the next stages of the process. And obviously we have artists who we've worked with or who are working with us who are deaf, so we have all the right infrastructure to support and equal access to the information and the process. So we have this sort of body of people who have come forward, and a really interesting next step that we put in place, which is, we call it matchmaking. We don't want people to come with a notion of who they want to work with. We establish different ways in which they can meet and find out whether there's a spark of interest in terms of the research or their practice. And I can't really explain how it happens, because it can sometimes be really strange conversations in these social situations that we set up. For example, I think in the Trellis project, not necessarily Arbor, one of the academics happened to be talking to an artist about how interested they were in octopuses or octopi. And the other one was thinking about that, but one in computer AI research as an artist, and the other just because she was fascinated. And they never talked about that thing again, but they realized that they would perhaps like to explore some ideas together. And at that stage, we aren't paying people, which is slightly challenging, but I think we are now looking at every time we do a matchmaking or a mixture event where we bring these artists and academics who've applied, we will be starting to pay. We've done one now where we actually have said nobody should be coming to meet with us, nobody should be putting any time in without being paid for their attendance. Obviously, any support that is needed around for other people, that's all paid for by us. And then they come away and they meet people, and we don't put people together, they find each other. And the next stage is they make an application. And yesterday people were talking a lot about how many hours people and artists have to invest into putting their applications together. We keep ours so simple. It's like 1 page, 2 minutes. Okay, 1 page. And it's about their desire. They don't have to prove they've done anything before, but just that word of why they want to work together. And then they come together and they present as a team, and we pay them for that stage, and then we pay a group of people. Importantly, there's a cohort. So we have 6 projects working at any one time together. So there's a network of communication between the academics and the artists, and we support them all the way through the process. So that's the calls. Running out of time, but they also get a studio. So these artists have a studio where they can come together, they communicate with each other through WhatsApp about who's using the studio when, can they do workshops together. And we do social gatherings so they can get together, which isn't necessarily talking about the work at all. And we are evaluating. From day one, we've been evaluating. We don't actually do it. We get other people to give them the chance to say if they have issues or any challenges that we're not addressing, so that we can genuinely learn. And this time our evaluation is actually being run by an artist who specialised working with rare dementia, and is actually developing a new course within the School of Neuroscience around public engagement, and they're using this evaluation to help develop that course. I think what's really important, and might be my last point, because I'm not going to have time to tell you about what projects have come out of this. Right at the beginning, we also ask the artist and academic to come up with agreement between each other of how they want their relationship to be articulated, how they want to use information in the future, at what point they can start talking about the work, can it be used in research projects, and then that should grow, and it might change as they get to know each other better. And this is non-discipline specific. So we have artists from all sorts of different disciplines in this. It's not just visualize, it's visual arts, it's performance. One of the trellis projects, we had a jeweler who made the most incredible partnership work around cancer and made jewelry with people with lived experience. My last point is the communities. These artists are working with communities with motor neuron disease, Alzheimer's, early familial Alzheimer's, which is a horrific disease that 50% of people who carry the gene, their children will get the disease, but they can find out, but they still only know if they've got 50% chance. So they can live with that. So we're dealing with issues of uncertainty, and our team is really about how we can support that outcome. We don't really care. If there's a permanent outcome, great. If it's a conversation that they've recorded, but that's been the meaningful part of the relationship, great. So again, what the end journey is very much to do with that partnership. So I think I've probably run out of time. There's so much around this trellis and arbor project that we're learning about establishing these residency opportunities that we'd all be really happy to talk about it at any time. My slides on.
Yeah.
Oh.
Bring them through. That's the building. That's the logo. That's the mixer. And that's one of the images of the development of project. I'm really sorry, I just got chatting.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for the cough. I didn't realise my mic was on. I'm Russell Martin. This is the only slide that I have, so I won't have the curse of forgetting to move them on. I'm just going to leave that up, so in case anyone wants to get in touch with me later on about any of this or anything else. So I'm from Artquest. Artquest is a public programme of University of the Arts London, supported by the Arts Council, so we're publicly funded. I've been with Artquest since it started in 2001. Which is a very long time to have a job, but it's always been part-time. So I've always done a lot of other things around about it as well. We've got 4 staff, and we employ about 50 artist freelancers and other people every year to deliver the programme. We work with lots of other organizations in partnership. We're an LGBT-led organization open to everyone. And our main program focus is around reducing inequity in the arts, particularly for artists, and particularly around on the basis of socioeconomic background, which most artists fall into, because most artists have other jobs and don't get paid very much to be artists. Also around caring responsibilities and any other kind of minoritized identities. So do check the website. There's lots more information on that, and you can get in touch with me directly if you like. So although we have run residencies in the past, international residencies and research residencies in London, I'm going to talk about a different piece of work that we're currently engaged in called Tender, which is a research project that we're doing based on our experience and the experience of working with partners. And Tender is around equity, particularly around application and selection processes, particularly also around open calls, which has been touched on a lot today. So a bit about our context and why we decided to do that from a UK context. Open calls is probably pretty much how most artists get most of their work in the UK, other than the kind of little black book just appointing someone that you know or who's kind of been a bit famous, the closed/closed call, if it's open or closed. So as a result of that, because it involves directly so many artists and so many organizations, we feel that if we can improve those processes, and more than the processes, the kind of philosophy behind that, which I'll get into a little bit later on, then we can start to leverage a kind of cornerstone of how the art world works more generally, and particularly how the art world thinks it works and says it works in this more equitable, open, we'll have an open call, anyone can apply, who is anyone, is starting to unpick that through this project. So yeah, a lot of those processes are just accepted. Like, oh, you do an open call, you always do it this way. This is what an application looks like. We always ask for these things. So we've been doing actual hard research around that, about what is needed, how helping organizations to question what those processes are, and to think it through in a more way that's more useful for them and more useful for artists as well. Obviously, as Joey said as well, artists' careers are generally quite unstructured. There's no kind of career development, there's no promotion, there's not often very much increase in pay. So from the outside, it's quite difficult to tell if one opportunity is more prestigious than the other, or if one artist is doing better than another. There's also quite low regulation around artist opportunities, what an opportunity is or isn't. Is it a job as a freelancer? Is it an award? Is it a grant? What do those words specifically mean? What are the legal implications around those things, particularly around rates of pay? Most artists obviously are freelance, so they're not covered by national minimum wage legislation in the UK. So you can be given an award for 6 months of work and your hourly rate might end up being 75p an hour, but that's legal because you don't get national minimum wage protections. Obviously also, so therefore being picked for things through an open call process is one of the main ways that artists can quote unquote prove that they're progressing and prove that they're doing better than their peers in their career. It gives a bit of a reputational boost. Being picked for one thing makes it more likely you'll be picked for something else. There's kind of a snowball effect that can build up with these things. And also, if you're picked for more things, then you must be a better artist than other people, because lots of people want you and want your work. So these are often the ways that artists are kind of constructing what a career trajectory or a career progression might look like. As an interesting side note, in 2021-22, the Jerwood Foundation did the One-to-One Fund, which some of you may have heard of if you're based in the UK or spend some time here, which was very small grants, about £2,000, and they were awarded on the basis of a random number generator. So anyone who applied and who was eligible was basically put into the pot, and a number was picked, and if your number was picked, you got the money. When they did evaluation about that, a lot of the artists thought, this is great. This is, you know, it's kind of, everyone stands at equal chance. It's a bit like a lottery. It's kind of more transparent about what it is. There is no selection criteria. But then a significant number of other artists hated it because they wanted to be picked for something. They wanted to be chosen by a person who says, you're better than that person for reasons that we can barely identify or describe, but nevertheless, you are better, therefore you are given this, the gatekeepers have awarded you this opportunity. So it's interesting that even when there's things in place to try and make it arguably completely equitable, completely random, that there's still pushback from artists around that. So it's more complex than just do these processes and then everything will be fine. So yeah, the other thing as well is that of course, artists, if you're applying as an artist for something, it's often an award that's a fixed amount of money. So you're not entering into it from a platform of negotiation about, well, this is how long this project's actually going to take. This is what my day rate is. Let's use that to start negotiating or something. It's awarded as a prize or a grant or something else. So it's not that when you feed that into the fact that a lot of artists don't get an awful lot of professional practice, there are organizations like Artquest and AN and Engage and many, many others that provide that kind of information for artists, but there's not, yeah, it's more complicated around also confidence and what people feel they deserve and taking up these opportunities and then enacting them as well, that can compound that low level of confidence for artists to want to be able to negotiate, feel that they even can negotiate on something. So what we've kind of learned from our process, which I won't go into, it's on the website, it'll take too long, but it was a fairly extensive process. I'm working with other organizations and intervening in their processes to iterate different solutions. The main general point is that there's no single way to make open call more equitable. It depends on what the call is. It depends on who you're interested in attracting to the call. It depends on the type of project that you're doing, the resources that the organization has. Do you have 2 members of staff, or are you UCL, or are you UAL? And also the wider political context that you operate in and the funders that you have. The values that those people have, the values that the artists have. So there's no one-hit wonder. There's no silver bullet for this. So which is where we get into the more philosophical end of things about why we're doing this in the first place and why we're constructing these things. So the first point that came out really clearly when we talked to artists about it was that organizations need to be really honest about their motivations for doing this, which goes back to a lot of what Joey was saying to begin with as well. Why are you offering this opportunity for artists? Is it because it's always been part of your program and therefore you're kind of doing it almost on autopilot? Is it about artist development? If it's about artist development, does there need to be a public event? Is a public event about satisfying your funders? That's a legitimate thing to do, but just to be honest about what that motivation is. Because making those motivations public will then help artists decide whether or not they should even apply, whether or not it's worth their time to apply. A lot of labor goes into an application. So it's good to know from the beginning, do I stand a chance for that? So basically, counterintuitively, perhaps, to the way things usually go, organizations should really be aiming for as few applications as possible, which are as closely matched to what they're looking for, so that you don't have to spend an awful lot of time selecting, and you can then have an engagement with the other people who didn't get that application, that opportunity at that point. And that was really the single most important part of the research that we did. Then also we found out a lot around reducing barriers. Obviously, you can't talk really about eliminating barriers to application because we live in a very unequal society. So there are always going to be barriers based on people's socioeconomic background, their caring responsibilities, their gender, whatever, many, many other factors. So we can't eliminate those as arts organizations, but we can aim to acknowledge them, understand them, and address them to try to reduce them. And to focus on whatever kind of artist whatever kind of background you're interested in looking for, aim to reduce those barriers in particular, bearing in mind that reducing barriers for some people will reduce barriers for everyone else as well. But it's about working out where that focus should be. Also for organizations to be prepared to change their mind, to try out new things. It's to have things in alternative formats, to be open for artists to get in touch before the deadline and ask for a conversation. In our experience of doing this, not an awful lot of artists take it up. It's not an expensive thing to do. It's not a huge drain on resources. We are a team of 4 part-time people, and we are able to do that quite easily, just because not many artists will get in touch about it. Again, so that's the kind of more general things. More specifically, be really clear about who you're looking for and say who you're looking for. Is it artists at the start of their careers? Is it artists who are minoritized for whatever reason, for some political reason? And specifically state on your application that artists from those backgrounds are particularly encouraged, particularly welcome. And it feels like it's maybe not such a significant thing to do, but it does have a huge impact on artists, whether they're thinking or not, whether or not to apply. That extra bit of encouragement will actively encourage more people to apply. Think about, related to that, think about where you advertise. If you only advertise in the arts press or in art specialist things, only artists who know about those networks and those links are going to see the opportunity in the first place. Is there more general places that you can advertise? If you're only advertising in art schools, for example, only art students are going to see that. So if your opportunity is for art students, that's perfect. That's probably all you're going to need to do. But think about, more actively think about where you're going to be seeking people from other types of identities outside of the arts that they have. Be really clear about what your processes are. Is it nominations? Is it what's the selection panel? There's some discussion as to whether or not you should disclose who's on the selection panel before or after the deadline. If you do it before, there's some conversation that maybe it would encourage people who are in those selection panels networks to apply, thinking that they'll get an advantage. But also, if you see yourself represented on a selection panel, you're more likely to apply. So it's a bit 50-50 on that one. And talk about what basis you're going to be selecting people, and then stick to that. You know, if it's about artists in an early stage in their career, you're going to get artists who don't have much experience, obviously. So do you need to ask them for their CV? Is that a key piece of information that you need, or is it not? We at Artquest, for our open calls, we haven't asked for CVs in about 10 years because the CV doesn't really tell us anything. We're interested in what they want to do next. And if it's about an emerging artist, you can't really tell what they're going to do next on the basis of what they've already done. You can tell what they're going to do next on the basis of their idea and the amount of resources you can put into it to support them with mentoring, with production support, that it's a learning journey for them as well, because that's the particular kinds of things that we do. Obviously, that isn't what everyone is going to be doing. Some people do want things for very senior artists, very well-established artists, so they would have different processes. Also giving people a timeline about when the selection is going to happen so they know when to expect an announcement. You can also consider two-part application processes. If something is particularly complex, if a project is going to be particularly complex, you can ask for a very short idea, a couple hundred words of an idea with someone's contact details, and then select a few from that to do a shorter, to get a short list and pay people for a couple of days of their time to work up something else. Also adding value to the applicant's experience. So if you've got 200 people that have applied for your opportunity and one person gets it, what do the other 199 people get? Maybe these are people who have spent time, invested their time in your organization because they're passionate and interested in what you're doing. So maybe you can organize an event for them. Maybe there's some surveying you can do with them. Maybe there's some peer mentoring groups. Maybe there's some meetings. Maybe they're, at the very least, maybe there's feedback on their application if they ask for it. Also, obviously, matching that with the capacity and the resources of your organization. So not over-promising things that you can't deliver, but acknowledging that people have invested in you so you can invest a little bit in them rather than just, this is the winner and the winner takes all. Yeah, and finally, be realistic. You know, most arts organizations in the UK, about 90% of arts organizations in the UK have fewer than 8 employees. People are very, very low resourced. Arts Council funding, which funds most arts organizations in some way or another, has been at a standstill since 2010. So everyone's resources are low. Also, most arts organizations are staffed by artists, exactly as you were saying again, Joey, that how do you move from being the bridesmaid to the bride? So be ambitious with what you're trying to do, but match that with your resources and be very clear about that. You know, you can, artists will understand. Artists know that everything operates on a shoestring. So they're quite open to having those conversations and to finding out how you can work together. And ultimately, if you can't resource the things that you need to do to make the open call as high quality as you need it to, then you can't do it in that form. You have to then think of a different way of doing it, whether that's additional fundraising, whether it's a shorter project, a smaller project, working with more partners, which takes a bit longer to set up, getting other staff time, freeing up other staff time. You've got to match what you can do with what you're telling artists that they can expect. And kind of be approachable to artists. If someone wants to be in touch, to talk something over, that it's probably going to take 5 minutes of your time on the phone. It's not a huge amount of resource. So I think a lot of organizations that we've spoken to tend to use the open call as a distancing measure as well. Like you fill in that form and then we'll do this bit. But actually, if you keep in touch with artists at the beginning of that process, it makes it clearer for everyone. You can add, if someone has a question, lots of other people probably have the same question. So you can publish the answer to that question and it will save a lot of people a lot of time. So finally, in terms of what's coming next for us with this project, this is the starting point of a bigger piece of work or a bigger piece of philosophy, I guess, about how artists are matched with work. So ultimately, it's about finding alternatives to the open call process in totally. To finding ways that artists don't have to keep putting in lots of time and effort and labor into applying for things that they may or may not ever get, and also making that a more satisfying process for the organizations, that they can learn from these artists as well. So kind of making it more equitable between artists and organizations, amongst artists themselves as well. So yeah, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Lissa and I speak in the name of Flanders Arts Institute. And we are an expertise center, information center, support center for the visual arts, performing arts and classical music in Flanders, Belgium. We give advice, we inform, we collect data also about residencies. We do research. We do international relations, international promotion. We collaborate internationally. We think together with the art scene in Belgium, and we work on certain themes. We call it here innovation and development. So we look at issues, emergencies, urgencies in the sector, and we discuss and we work and research them together with artists, professionals, organizations in the arts in Belgium. So this is what we do. We do not give funding. We do not organize residencies. We inform about residencies in Belgium. So we inform artists about opportunities abroad. We try to set up a platform of residencies in Belgium, even though we're not there yet. So the theme of residencies is something also very dear to our heart and to our work. I think I was invited to talk today because we have recently published a book called A Fair New World, Art Crisis and Transition. It's the result of it's also a tryout and an example of co-creation, going back to the theme of today. It's a result of a 2 years trajectory that we conducted within the arts field in Flanders, Belgium, after the COVID period, where we were also commissioned by the government to monitor the impact of COVID on the arts And we would ask ourselves, when the art sector was for second or third or fourth time completely shut down, even though other sectors were allowed to slowly opening up, we remember that there were a lot of protests from the arts because they were still closed, theaters, music venues, etc. And so we ask ourselves, well, we are not considered as a basic need in times of crisis. So what is the role, the place, the position of the art sector in greater society? And how can we, as the art sector, build together, co-create, let's say, more fair, more sustainable, more inclusive art world? So it's, I mean, it's a big trajectory. We don't have, we learned a lot. It's also interesting to mention that we are a learning organization. I mean, it's a specialist. I mean, we do have expertise. We have a lot of information and knowledge, but I'm not an artist. I'm not working within a house, like an arts organization. So we think ourselves as a learning organization, and we learn together with the people we work with in Flanders. So I have I actually have 5 publications here. I'm happy to give them. Feel free to give your card and we can send them to you also. So I will focus on the publication as an example of co-creation. You will see. So we started thinking, how can we involve people in the arts to join the reflection and sing along. So we had 4 open calls, again, open calls. I will focus on the last one, on the second one. So we had a call on working with care in the arts, working digitally in the arts, multiple voices in the arts. And then the second one, the one I also contributed to, is sustainability and international collaboration. Classic open calls, jury selection, you know, we had a small budget for collecting ideas. So it was really about, you have an idea, tell us your idea, and we'll see what we can do with it. We worked with a jury of artists, producers, curators, and programmers, and they were very active in writing the call together with us. So that was already a surprise because they felt really part of the project, not just being there as a jury, but also being part of the reflection that goes, you know, before the actual publication of an open call. So we wrote the open call together. They also suggested that we would translate the open call. So we mainly communicate in Dutch and in English, and then we translate it into French, in Arabic, and in Spanish, which are the, let's say, the languages that are spoken by people in Brussels or in Belgium. And then we, the jury, we had about 40 ideas. We published the ideas, and the jury in the end selected 11 ideas. The other calls had 1 idea, and 1 idea got a bit of funding. And so we worked together with 11 ideas throughout 2 years, 2 years' time. We had 3 groups. I mean, we met digitally. We had 1 group talking about sustainability within the arts. We had 2 collectives, one based in Tunis and another one based in the UK, and they were talking about how do we build international communities. And the third one, which I will also focus a bit more here, is a letter for transnational fair practice, which is also when we collaborate together in a post-COVID time. How do we do that transnationally? How do we co-create and co-collaborate? So the third group drafted a letter that I will read. I will read parts of it, a letter for transnational fair practice. It's an exercise by Pieter Nelvermoortel, Anna Manubens, and Yassen Vasiliev. Yassen is a dramaturge based in Sofia. Anna Manubens is a curator leading an organization in Barcelona, and Pieter Nelvermoortel works in Vienna also as a curator. So it was really an exercise to see how do we deal with international art communities. Let's see my notes. I think I will just read parts of the letter. And bear with me, English is my third language after Dutch and French. So the first title or the first subject chapter is "The needs and rights of artists and cultural workers are a public issue." This is the principle on which working solidarity is built. The idea that our working conditions are not private matters, but issues we should share between ourselves within the field and make transparent. Things such as hourly rates, working hours, production budgets, time off, issues of mindful travel, and inclusivity and diversity, which all contain an inherent political dimension. The terms and conditions under which an artist or cultural worker agrees to contribute their work to a public process or display should not rely on their will, availability, and energy when negotiating. There should already be structures in place to protect the artist or cultural worker. We, the signatories of the letter, insist that hosting institutions should take responsibility for finding a way to preserve the needs and rights of artists and cultural workers. If a solution to better support a specific project may sometimes translate into committing to do less overall, adapting the physical or temporal dimensions of the work, we agree that this is a preferable solution rather than stretching resources thin or overworking, which may lead to burnouts and precarity. Questions to reflect on together at the start of the collaboration. Are institutions raising, sustaining, or undermining the working standards of the artistic field they are operating in? Are the working standards of the artistic field made properly, transparent to the artists and cultural workers developing a project within an institution? Is an artist or cultural worker's vulnerability a personal issue or a collective one? Second, a network of partners strengthens collective imagination. We, the signatories of the letter, strongly believe in the strength of collective imagination. We encourage the creation of a support structure around a traveling project, artist or cultural worker. We are aware that working internationally is not only a way to describe the fact that a project, an artist or a cultural worker travel, it also implies the creation of a network of partners that have the potential to become a safety net. Through this, we believe projects that travel don't just have one moment of display, but have future ramifications in terms of working relationships. When looking for ideas to work together mindfully, the network created by the project can step in and be supportive. Any institution working internationally within the field of culture in any phase of development of a project could reach out to the rest of the institutions that are directly or indirectly concerned with the same topic in order to find creative and collaborative solutions to uneven terms and conditions. You still okay? Questions to reflect on together at the start of the collaboration. Do we agree to reset the value of the same project simply because it is presented in another context? Do we accept that an artist or cultural worker should forfeit building up social security rights in a different national working environment? Do we know of, or can we imagine an institution where care for the artists and cultural workers comes first, and productivity and results come second or third? And third, fair working conditions need context-specific answers. We, the signatories of the letter, we want to understand transnational working conditions in a way that allows us to handle them instead of being overwhelmed by them. We want to understand the context in which they are created. We are aware that it is impossible and even not desirable to set standards that would be imposed on all scales and locations. There is no one-size-fits-all solutions that we are aiming for. Universally intended solutions are top-down, not mindful of local realities, and they end up practicing biased and exclusionary ways of working. If there's a way to find an agreement on how to soften the randomness of international payments and conditions, it is by understanding that there are no systemic solutions, but fairer conditions can be established in context-sensitive manner. Again, questions to reflect on together at the start of a collaboration. How many iterations of this project, with this duration and for this money, for instance, would be needed to make living life-sustainable conditions for artists over, let's say, a year, considering the context the project is displayed in? Are artists coming from other national contexts uplifting or undermining local working conditions? Are they even aware of what those local conditions are? What would be needed to allow them to be more aware of? And then date signatures. So everybody is welcome to sign the letter. You can also find it online on our website. And this is really a plea for organization to take into account the different dimensions of working internationally, working transnationally, when you work with artists coming from all around the world, with different financial or payment rules. So it was a very inspiring exercise. We are also publishing a lot of open calls. Again, on our website, we publish our own open calls. We publish open calls of residencies internationally and nationally. And in recently we thought also about how do we draft open calls, how do we draft our own open calls, and we kind of drafted for ourselves a kind of memory guidelines for ourselves when drafting open calls. But we also want to let's say empower artists when deciding applying to open calls. So here I have maybe to start of the discussion, a few considerations for transparent, fair, inclusive, and accountable open calls. I think Russell, you already fed us with a lot of interesting insights, but is the open call really open without implicit preferences and assumptions? Is the call accessible to everyone for whom it is intended to? Is the call fair, ethical, inclusive? Are the submission and selection criteria clearly formulated? Are the expectations about the outcome clear and transparent? Is the energy that the candidates have to invest in the application taken into account? Again, like what you said also. Is the selection procedure clear and transparent? Does the selection procedure include sufficient time and expertise to value all the proposals? What happens with proposals and candidates that are not selected? We hear, many examples of when it's a no, you don't even know it's a no. So these are questions more drafted for organizations. We also have guidelines for artists on think twice when applying for residency or for projects. And I propose that we kick off with these questions maybe for the discussion. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. My mic back on? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Wow, that was amazing. You guys covered a lot of ground, I'd say, in the 4 presentations. We've got a little bit of time. I've decided we're on African time, everybody. So I'm going to add an extra 5 minutes for the conversation because I felt that was, there's quite a lot of stuff to digest. I can see a question here. And then also do let me know if there's any questions already on the oh yeah, okay. So we'll start in the room. 1 question here, 1 question at the top, and then we'll head over to you, James, for any online questions.
My name is Shainette. I'm from Egypt. I'm a choreographer and dancer. Thank you very much for everything you brought up. It's a lot to take in and a lot to talk about, and I've been feeling that way since yesterday. A lot of very valuable topics are being opened, and they all need a lot of time to delve into. So I'm going to add on one element that has been in my mind is the urgency of creating versus the timeline of open call application election, and how that affects the creative process in the sense of how do artists integrate the fact that they have to wait for a year or two or in order to actualize their idea. That's one aspect, and another aspect is where you stand in your creative process from different open calls and what your needs are in terms of how they need to be engaged with the artist at a very particular stage in the creation. So no previous work re-shown or no idea that you already started working on can be included, or that type of limitation to the life of a creative process is also something to think about. Another thing is the reality of technical residencies. There is a lot of research and there is a lot of creation, but the idea, like for performing arts, you need also time to work with the technical aspect of the work, and that is not really offered to many dance makers or theater makers. It's only provided to very big names in the industry that they have the space and time to have the technical resources, and that really affects the quality of the creative work that is being shared. Yeah, so.
Want us to do the
I mean, I think, yeah, I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. I think there is a lot of serendipity involved with an open call, that it arrives at just the right moment for the artist who's doing just something at exactly the right moment for that. And ultimately, really, for me, open calls, as so much of the art world, it's about power. It's about, we are specialists. And I absolutely include myself with this. I've sat on selection panels, we've run open calls. That it's about, we have this kind of power to pick someone and raise them up. Out of all the people doing stuff that would be relevant to this open call, we're picking this person to raise them up and show everyone what this thing is. And that's ultimately an expression of power. So within that, where does co-creation come in, the theme of the talk, when we're talking about open calls, which is fundamentally a very skewed process and relationship. And that's why ultimately we're looking at how to get kind of beyond or past open calls, or find a different way to match people with work. Because I'm not really sure if you can square that off. I think on a super practical basis, I know a lot of artists who, when something comes along that they can apply to, but maybe they've started working on it, or maybe it's been somewhere, they'll just lie about it. And I think a lot of people in the art world kind of expect that to happen. You know, and I think that's, I also think that's fine, really, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a lot of artistic integrity involved in how do you formulate your ideas to answer an open call, or is it genuinely connected to the open call? And what you just said in terms of, where have I started? Did I start? That, like, talking about it means that I started, or like this idea of start point of a project as a key thing is also something, and how accountable you are in terms of that is also something important to think about.
And I think also for artists are kind of, it's in their DNA to doubt themselves and to doubt, is this good enough? Should I is this ready to go out in the world? Can I ask for something else? You know, I'm so grateful to get this opportunity. I've been picked for this thing, but actually I need this other thing, but I won't ask for it because then maybe it will go away. Which is part of any kind of creative process. You're putting something on paper, you're making something in your studio. Of course, you're going to be beset by doubts as to whether or not it's good enough. But if someone's picked you, then they've picked you because they want that thing. They want what you've got. And you can use that to base a negotiation on, or base more confidence on. You know, it takes practice, of course.
Yeah, I was just going, can I just add to that a little bit? And it's your comment or thought about those technical developments, the point at which you're starting to think about your work and how to make sure you're being given the space and the time to actually work out how to deliver it. And I think that's very much about this open negotiation right at the beginning, when your practice has a certain type of process behind it that you need to be able to make sure is protected in a way through the residency. They're the kind of conversations I would be hoping you could have right at the beginning. Because as Graham said, Russ said you've been selected. Therefore, as the host, we should be building in the scope for you to adjust how you program your work, or even expand things. I mean, with the Arbor project, we had an artist who selected who unfortunately became quite ill. So said, well, I'll stand back and give the opportunity to another artist. And we said, no, we'll just change the program. We'll just do it differently. It's your project, you can do it any way you want. So I think it's about the openness and the generosity of spirit and the sort of willing to break down sort of things that you think, oh, we've got to do it this way, we've got to do it this way, but actually you don't. You can find ways of enabling people, because no artist is making work in the same way. So these things have got to be responsive to those people who have gone perhaps through that torturous process of being selected. Once you're there, we have to make the opportunity right for them.
And one very quick thing, that's also about the confidence of the organization to go back to their funder and say, this is going to take an extra year. We know we said that we would do it this year, but it's going to take an extra year because this has happened. We want to support this person. They're going through this stuff. So it's everyone has to have confidence to talk to whoever's above them.
And the more readily we capture that, the more readily we're going to be able to change that sort of the funder's understanding of that. Sort of, it's got to be 12 months. I mean, at UCL, we have an issue because our funding is really end of financial year, what you do the next year, but we just have to be kind of clever with it as much as we can.
Yeah. Got a question at the top.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Yu Shen from Taiwan, and I represent the space that we run the artist residency program, and also with the community. So throughout this year, at the beginning of this year, we got the chances by our program that we host one of the artists and researcher from UCL, actually. So, and it turns out that I want to raise my question to Sam because I found out your model is quite interesting, which combining academic perspective and community and artists. But throughout the conversation, I would like to ask, can you elaborate a bit more? How do you evaluate the whole process? Because this is like at least 3 different parties. And usually I realize that academic language through to daily life, like the community itself, is somehow a very, very different discourse. So I was wondering, can you share a bit more on this, on the evaluation process? Thank you.
Yes, and actually the rest of the team is here, so they can talk more detail about this with people after us as well. We start our evaluation before we actually start the project. There's a clear set of methodologies that we want to have in place, and each year, because Trellis has been going we're into our 4th year and we have another 5th year of funding around it, and so there's a clear plan of at what point in each stage we're going to go into dialogue with each of the partners. So there will be a deep support structure all the way along with the academics. Say, how's it going for you? Are you comfortable? Is your research and how you want this to be developed kind of coming through? Are you learning? Are you changing how you think about your research because of the relationship with the artist? And similarly, we'll have those one-to-one conversations throughout the process with the artist. How are you feeling? How's the financial aspects of this going? And I'll just pause on that in a second. And then at the end, so we have independent evaluators doing that. So it's so that people can talk very openly and very clearly about challenges they might have. I think the relationship and the evaluation with the communities is slightly, I suppose, perhaps a bit softer. It's through sort of ongoing shared experiences and dialogue and how the projects actually realise themselves at the end. With the Arbour project, we're actually doing it slightly differently. We're sharing a number of questions in advance with people to say, these are the kind of things we want to have a conversation with you about at key stages. And that's all being done to camera. And then we will edit that with the people of what they want the stories to be about at each stage of the project. And actually what those questions are being framed by an artist and an academic outside the team. So we don't know what that's going to look like. It could be really exciting. We don't know yet. And actually, we're going to evolve that as the project goes on. And it's vital. I mean, the fact I'm saying Trellis is now going into its 5th year next year is because that evaluation has enabled us to evidence the impact and how artists have grown and benefited from being part of the project. And academic skills have developed. And I'll just give an anecdote. We started some of the evaluation with one of the Arbour teams where truly the artist could be talking about the academic's research, and the academic could truly be talking about how their practice is developed and how they're working together. The boundaries between their skills and who they are just gently softening. I think the evaluation on Arbour with communities will be much harder because these are really terribly, very emotional. There's a lot of people talking about things that are really deeply affecting their lives, and how that's informing the final artwork we don't know yet. So we will be taking a lot of guidance on how to engage with these communities. So yeah, so we capture it in every way we can. It can be anecdotal and it can be data, but we've got to, Bryony and Lizzie sitting here will talk very eloquently about this, more so than me. We're very careful about how we capture data. We have to think about ethics extensively around the work, because we are working with communities who are vulnerable in all sorts of parts of the work. So we have to be very careful about what we're sharing about some of those stories and some of those individuals. And do we have available reports, Lizzie? We've got them internally, haven't we? And we use them, but so we're learning about evaluation. If I had money, we would have a person evaluating every single thing. We'd have a full-time member of staff working with the team, learning about how we can do these things differently. And I'm sorry, I've gone on for ages. I'll stop. Did I answer the question?
James, do you want to? Okay. Any last questions in here? Okay, there's one. Just here.
Thanks. I'm Victoria Tillotson. I lead on artist residencies at Watershed in Bristol. I had a question for Sam. Sorry.
Okay.
I was really interested to hear about you saying that you pay people during the selection process, because I think it's a really great thing to do. I was just thinking about the fact that actually a lot of people that are running residencies have often quite sort of limited budgets, or kind of finite budgets, which are, there's no ability to extend those if they wanted to include something like that. So I'm just wondering what your approach to that was, and whether when you built that in, you had to make any compromises to be able to fit that in your budget.
So with the Trellis and the Arbour project, we haven't actually done that yet, but we have another residency project that we're doing in partnership with London College of Fashion. And because of the need that we recognised in Trellis and Arbour, that we started it there, which meant we planned it ahead. So it was one of the things that we, UCL, decided we would take out of another budget to make sure that happened. Moving forward, I think our budgets will have that much more rigorously in it. We're fortunate that because of the evaluation, a lot of our funding now comes from other organisations, such as the Foundation for Future London, which is a major institution on the park, and they welcome budgets being allocated to supporting fees structures. So we're able to build that in more. I think we will spend less on output in the future and more on the process, on the basis of that learning. So when anybody comes to any of our things, we would cover costs anyway, but now we're saying we want to start paying for that time. as well. And also on that matter, I should just say in the process, which is a two-stage process for this, in stage one, those collaborations that are being funded, we work with them to analyse their budget. And we have regularly said to perhaps some of the more inexperienced artists in the project, you can't pay yourself that little. You've got to pay yourself more. We adjust how much time you're going to spend on certain elements of the project, because we could not live with ourselves if you're getting £50 a day. So we do monitor that with all of the different projects. And the other thing to say is our academics are not paid. So all of these projects, the money goes entirely to the artist, but there's also an issue there. They are project managing something quite complex. So the other thing we have to offer is that project management support, because it's not just about being artists. It's about managing something that is quite complex. So I think all of those issues about skills development, supporting people with their time, making sure people are paid properly, actually underpins all of these things. And that's why I say the outcome isn't really the most important thing. Artists always want to make work, but if they choose not to, that's absolutely fine.
Can I just something about paying selection panels as well? Our policy is if someone has a full-time job, we don't pay them. If they're a freelancer, we pay them. So that can be a way, at least in the short term, to mitigate some of those costs. Just ask people to be in your selection panel who have jobs. But we do, and we have been in a position where a selection panel, we've allocated 2 days of selection time, and they said we can't decide, we need another day, and then we have to find some more money from somewhere to pay them. But we find it. From funders, particularly Arts Council, they expect to see freelancers being paid anyway, so that tends to be an easier sell.
That's great, thank you.
Cheeky last question.
Hi. Small insertion. I'm Julie Upmeyer, artist and initiator based in Wales. When we're speaking about collaboration, co-creation, there's also a group of people who come into these projects as collaborators. I'm working on a long-term collaborative project at the moment. More often than not, if you ask, they say, sure, we accept collaborators, but you have to share. So just to stick that in the dialogue that if it's not an institutionally supported collaboration, if you're coming into it as a collaborator, there's often a splitting of resources, time, and most importantly, money. So you're like a half a person.
Yeah.
Small insertion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everybody's attention this morning. And a big thank you to our panel. Just maybe you could all join me in celebrating Joey, Russell, Sam, and Lissa for this morning.